Hello, I'm Rudranath Sanyal. Welcome to War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. Once again, we thank all our viewers who keep in touch with us from different parts of the country and abroad. Well, viewers, it is perhaps for the first time since the Second World War that a nation state has actually threatened and attacked US installations. Yes, that is what happened when recently Iran fired its ballistic missiles at US installations in Iraq. In this edition of War and Peace, we will skip the pictures that you have already seen. We will straight away come to an analysis to go to the bottom of the determinants behind the strife between Iran and the United States in the modern security environment. Our experts for you in this edition of War and Peace are Ambassador Anil Trigunayath, who has joined us from Chanakyapuri. Ambassador Trigunayath is a veteran Iran expert, and Lieutenant General Ellen Singh, senior security analyst, has joined us from Imphal. General Singh has especially worked on the developments in West Asia. So, viewers, the topic for you in this edition of War and Peace: the strife between Iran and the United States in the modern security environment. Let's begin with Ambassador Anil Trigunayath, who has joined us from Chanakyapuri in Delhi. Ambassador Trigunayath, it is perhaps for the first time that a nation state has actually threatened and attacked US installations. How did it happen?
You see, the West Asia is probably the most volatile region in the world. It has the maximum number of hotspots, and each of which has the potential to carry it into a much larger conflagration and conflict. Ever since President Trump arrived on the scene, his withdrawal from the treaty, which is called Joint Comprehensive Program of Action for containing the nuclear program of Iran, has become far more accentuated, and all these problems that were being resolved somehow have come to the fore. And that is why the relationship between US and Iran and its neighbors has deteriorated much more over the last 1.5 years. And therefore now what we saw was actually a culmination of this. These deep-seated problems that have happened, and the problem of the United States arbitrariness that has caused a major problem in this whole. Now I feel what happened is that the attack on the US installations was not really an attack, but it was more symbolic in its context, which means that the Iranians were not looking for a war, and as was mentioned by Jawad Zarif, that they were only looking for a greater collaboration, some kind of a negotiation, and leaving the door open for further talks.
So is that a new form of diplomacy in modern geopolitics?
I personally feel that the biggest geopolitical mistake that has been committed was the attack on Iraq in 2003 by the Bush administration. Since then, not only the region and the world has become far more unstable, a greater vehemence of various terrorist groups and extremist groups all over the world, but it has also destabilized the situation completely. Now the situation in Iran, and you know that when Iran-Iraq war of 1990s and 88 happened, that was also at the behest of the Americans when they supported Saddam Hussein, and eventually in 2003 they took him out. Now the attack this time on General Soleimani was, it seems to me personally, that was to convey a message to the Iranians that whatever they did in the past in the Gulf, when they attacked the Iranian, when the Iranians took down the American drone, and the American contractor was killed, cannot go unanswered, because the Americans also can't take the body bags. They cannot afford to let their people be killed in the war. So Trump, personally, I feel, does not want war, but what he wants essentially is one-upmanship. He is quite strong and rich with his words, threatening words, has been trying to contain Iran through his maximum power tactics, which has not pressure tactics, which have not really borne much fruit. So there is a great difference between the two, because here neither Iran wants a war nor the Americans want a war. But the war could happen because not of these people, but because of, as happened in the First World War, it could happen because of a very small reason, which can be carried on by the proxies or by the pro-Iranian militias, and that could spiral into a war which will be difficult to contain and could become a third world war.
Now let's go to Imphal, from where General Ellen Singh has joined us. General Ellen Singh, it is perhaps for the first time that a nation state actually threatened and attacked US installations.
The attack was basically on a US base in Iraq. So firstly, and the Americans were aware that since they had provoked the Iranians, there is going to be a retaliation. In the Gulf War, American installations have been attacked. But this time it is different in the sense that President Donald Trump had promised a heavy penalty on the Iranians should it happen. So the difference lies in the existing scenario which was prevailing this time. And the Iranians wanted to send a message, hence they purposely used a ballistic missile based in Iran. And firing a ballistic missile is quite different from firing a rocket, because prior to firing of a ballistic missile, it has to be prepared. The warhead and the delivery means has to be met at first. Then only the delivery, the firing can take place. Hence, I'm quite sure that it was a very, very deliberate act by the Iranians.
That means they cannot launch ballistic missiles at short notice.
Yes, you see, most of the ballistic missiles may be stored in various underground adits, and it may be stored even in liquid nitrogen whose heating period is quite substantial. It could be anything from, say, 48 to 72 hours. Hence, it was a very, very deliberate act by the Iranians.
So is it some new facet of diplomacy in the modern security environment?
Yes, yes. This is, you see, one of the way of military diplomacy is nothing but trying to get the other side on the negotiating table by issuing various threats, by issuing how much damage can be caused to the other side. These are all required to be, the assessments are required to be given by the military. Hence, military diplomacy is always a part of an announcement by the head of the state that if you do this, we will be doing tit for tat, and thereby causing you maximum damage, and the amount of penalty or punishment that you will be receiving will be tremendous. These are also part of the military diplomacy.
Was it a surprise that the de-escalation happened so fast?
See, no one in this period, no one has got a stomach for a war, because any spiral going out of control can be devastating. As it is, the European Union are also equally tired of all the engagements, and one cannot really initiate a war just because of few domestic factors. Hence, war is a very serious factor and serious issue. Thus, better sense prevail with the planners of border countries, and they realize that it is better to de-escalate instead of allowing it to spin out of control.
You're watching War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. We will take a break now. Please keep watching.
Informative, incisive, intensive. Get your daily dose of news and analysis in English News Night every weekday at 9 p.m. on DD India. Channel number 620 on Tata Sky, 199 on Dish TV, 150 on Airtel, 28 on UCN and 395 on Videocon D2H.
Welcome back. You're watching War and Peace, your go-to program on security matters and geopolitics. In this edition of War and Peace, we are going into the cautions of the recent strife between Iran and the United States. And our guests for you in this edition of War and Peace are Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, who has joined us from Chanakyapuri in Delhi, and Lieutenant General Ellen Singh, who has joined us from Imphal. So, to go back to Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, in the beginning, Ambassador, both sides issued warnings.
You see, the thing is that, as I said earlier, that Iranians are not looking for a war. They know it because America is hyperpower today, and it will be impossible for any country to take them on militarily. But at the same time, they also, if they go down, they will take down the whole of the region. And region means the complete destabilization of the global economy, energy security for many countries. In fact, the world will go behind many, many decades. And therefore, the sane advice prevails. But at the same time, no country can compromise on its self-respect and want to be respected. And both Iran and the US have been looking for some way out of this. And of course, the Iraqis, the Omanis, the Europeans, everybody has been trying to bring about some kind of a semblance of a dialogue between Iran and US. But as long as the nuclear deal is somehow not sorted out, I think we will see another problem another time.
Do you think, Ambassador, Iran's ability to block the Strait of Hormuz is a big bargaining point for them?
Yes, you know, the Strait of Hormuz, through which almost 90% of the trade and the energy passes, and it is of extreme importance to countries like India and some other countries, and therefore, and also for the Gulf countries, and therefore it is extremely important that this passage, which is very narrow, remains open for navigation, and that is in everybody's interest. And that is precisely the reason that all the major powers have been working closely to see to it that it does not. And that definitely Iran has an edge there, but I'm quite sure that they are going to find out some other ways, and this would not be closed. But today, as we see, I mean, we do not know what will happen in 24 hours, but today as we see that US has also invited the Iranians to come to the table and talk, and they have to work out, and I'm quite sure the Qatari Emir or some other interlocutors will be working on to bring them together. So hopefully we'll not have that situation where there's going to impact the global trade and energy transit.
Ambassador, the de-escalation also happened very fast. So was that a surprise?
Well, personally, I was not surprised, because like Trump has not been wanting a war. As you know, he has avoided any war anywhere. He of course indulges in war of words, threats and sanctions, which he has been doing against any country on every country in the world. He has done it. But he is not the one who is actually wanting to go war. He is in fact has been propagating or withdrawing from all these conflicts. So at least I was always for sure that this will not lead to another war. Secondly, it was averted because the Iranians did not want to avenge it in a way that one for one. They had not attacked the base without prior information. They had shared the information about this attack with the Iraqi Prime Minister, and Iraqis had shared this information with the Americans, and therefore you see that there were no casualties. Because if there had been casualties, it would have been very difficult for the Americans not to retaliate. So therefore both sides have left the door open for negotiations and dialogue.
Ambassador, what will happen if war breaks out between Iran and the United States?
Well, everything will be, in my view, this will be the worst third world war if it happens, because see, in this war what will happen is that all the Iranians will not be directly able to take on the American might or the might of all its allies put together, or NATO or whatever. But what we can see is that in that case you will have this whole of West Asia going into flames, and that's what they will do through their missiles, unless by some reason through cyber warfare or some other means the Americans are able to neutralize the Iranian this thing. But then you have China, you have Russia, you have Turkey. Those are the major players in the region who will be doing it. It will impact in the biggest way on India. It will have a tremendous adverse impact, because we are importing almost 70% of our energy from there. We have almost 10 million Indians living there whose life and welfare would be of utmost importance to us. It will be virtually impossible to evacuate them from there. They are the ones who have been sending about $45 to $50 billion a year in remittances. So that will have a great impact on your economy. And that's what I feel, that for India, it is going to be the worst disaster ever. For decades, it will put our growth back, and we'll all be impacted very badly.
Let's go back to General Ellen Singh, who has joined us from Imphal. General Ellen Singh, what will happen if war breaks out?
See, the military comparison between Iran and United States is very, very, it will be not equal, because definitely the Americans are a world power, whereas Iranians at the best can be a Middle East power, not even a whole continental power. Hence, comparing these two will be different. But however, the Iranians may not go for a conventional war, and it can go for various other non-contact warfare. It can go for various other forms of warfare.
What will be the fallout from India's point of view?
If there is an all-out war, it's going to be basically Shia versus Sunnis. So we cannot alienate neither the Shia countries nor Sunni countries, especially Saudi Arabia and other countries which are basically Sunni countries. So we will have to play very fine, play by the ear.
Do you think many countries will now look up to India to play a lead role as a peacemaker?
We have one of the largest defense force in the world. Yes, we can definitely play a very, very important role. And in fact, a number of countries are looking towards us to play a lead role in the situation. And especially countries like Iran would like to depend on us rather than depending on other European countries or other Middle East countries. China, yes, but China may not really be acceptable to both the sides, whereas India will definitely be acceptable to both the sides. since we have good relations with all the countries, including Israel, Saudi Arabia, Iran, we can play definitely a much bigger role.
So how do you look at the future, General Ellen Singh?
India will definitely become more popular, and we have to be playing by the ear.
Let's go back to Ambassador Anil Trigunath once again. Do you think India will play a key role?
I mean, I'm saying that in case the war happens, then India will suffer greatly, China will suffer greatly, and both the rising Asian powers, their growth will be halted by many more years. India has excellent relations today under Prime Minister Modi with all the countries in the region. We have excellent relations, and that is something, and I personally always believe that bilaterally, India's West Asia policy has probably been one of the most successful of the Modi government. And so as far as our relations are concerned, as far as the supply of oil is concerned, as far as their investments are concerned, they are at their best at the moment. But in case of a war, what kind of a leverage do we have? I do not think we have enough leverage to avert the war. But what we can do, probably given our excellent relations, and which I'm sure the Indian government has been doing it somehow or the other, as the foreign minister recently met his Iranian counterpart, his Omanese counterpart in Oman, and bilaterally as well as he spoke to the Qatari Emir, who is close to both Iran and the US, the Qatari foreign minister. So Qatar has a very unique position at the moment. So our relations with all the countries are excellent. There have been various channels that have been open for dialogue, and India definitely can play a very constructive role of at least communicating the messages one way or the other, while conveying our own concerns should the things go out of hand and spiral out.
Ambassador, how do you look at the future?
We'll have more strategic access relations that will go forward in helping India in its growth, and along with West Asia, which is our extended neighborhood. India should play a greater role, much greater role as compared to what it has been doing until now, because there is a tremendous goodwill for India. The Gulf countries, the countries from the Middle East, whether it is in Syria or everywhere else, they look to India because they consider India as an honest partner. And we have good relations with the US at the moment, and I think, or with other countries, whether it's Russia or even with China in certain, because China and India do have the same interest as far as Middle East is concerned. And therefore, we should work together with our partners, works through BRICS, works bilaterally, works through RAIC under the UN, and anywhere else where India can play a role, we must do that. The biggest thing that goes in favor of India is India does not believe in crass commercialism. Number two, India is one of the biggest, or probably second biggest market for them. Its investments, for investments is excellent. Plus energy security, they are also dependent on the Indian huge market. Then for the food security, India and the Gulf countries could work together in third countries in Africa. So there are a lot of strategic advantages in a bilaterally sustaining relationship. And I think that from the Gulf and other countries in the West Asia, their perspective, India holds tremendous promise and potential.
So on that potential note, we come to the end of this edition of War and Peace, your go-to program on security and geopolitics. If you wish to write to us, you can send an email to warandpeace2004@hotmail.com. You can also send your letters to War and Peace, Room 513, Tower B, Doordarshan Bhavan, Copernicus Marg, New Delhi 110001. So thank you, Ambassador Anil Trigunath, who's joined us from Chanakyapuri in Delhi.
Thank you.
Thank you, General Ellen Singh, who's joined us from Imphal.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all. Bye-bye.